but I'm going to talk a little bit about performance reviews and how important they are because they impact, as a business, they impact your bottom line. It's something that is hard to quantify in an overall general number, but with each of your businesses, I could sit down with you and talk about what the impact is through retention costs, through productivity gains, and even through the benefits and the foresight of succession planning. So there's a lot of things that go into impacting the bottom line that can start with reviews. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. I'm going to talk about SMART goals. A lot of people have been using SMART goals, but we'll just do a refresher on that in case that's new to you. And then we'll talk about running effective meetings to review your employees, to talk about performance with your employees. And we'll use COIN or COILed, if you've heard of that, as a acronym and a way to provide that effective feedback. And then we'll talk, finally about making sure that we tie it back into how spending the time, because it does take time, spending the time on performance reviews can actually impact your growth and retention. So you're looking at performance appraisals. This is a way to make sure that you are maximizing your employees' potential so that they're driving the business forward, so that they are aligned with the goals and they're taking ownership of their job, but they're aligned with the goals of the company to produce the business results that you're looking for. Another benefit to these performance evaluations is that you can spend time spotting future leaders and making sure that the investment you as a business owner have put in is paying dividends, because time is money, and when we spend time on things like our employees, spend time on writing up performance evaluations, creating goals, creating effective feedback, you want that to benefit your company, and it truly can. So part of the challenge, there's a little bit of kind of an overcoming bad experiences with performance reviews. I have clients who talk about like the trauma of having performance reviews or weaponized performance reviews. And that is where, unfortunately, they've just gotten off track in the past. So part of what I'm going to spend a little bit of our short time on here is talking about focusing on the behaviors as well as the expected results and less about the noise around it, because we really want to dive into what the employee is doing. We want to dive into the things that you can measure, their attendance, their availability, their performance, their productivity, and make sure that it's focused in a way that you can move the company's goals forward. So, speaking of goals, goal setting is an important piece. We all know this. It is something that, as a business owner, you're helping the employees truly understand what the goal is. We spend a lot of time when we're at the executive level or owning a company, we spend a lot of time thinking, okay, great, I've made plans, I've done back of the napkin plans, I've done great fancy PowerPoint plans, and I know exactly what we're doing. But it's hard sometimes to take all of that knowledge that you have and translate it down for the employees. So goal setting is a way of taking these great big ideas and these great big goals that you have and making it into something that the employees can understand, attain, and continue to work forward on. It's something then that also helps the employees understand where they can concentrate their time and where they can improve. And having these clear conversations that are more about the actual activities and the goals and the things that the employees are doing, that helps remove some of the stress that employees feel around performance evaluations, that managers feel around performance evaluations. And it creates this way of translating that long-term goal and vision into something that the employees can do on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. Because in the end, we want to hold the employees accountable, and we want to be able to measure the results from the time that they're spending, from the money that we're paying the employees to work with us. So if you want to take a moment here and think about one goal that you have for the company that you may be sharing with the employees, or it could be a personal goal, that's absolutely fine too. Take a moment and just bring that to mind. You can write it down or type it up or text it to yourself, whatever is most comfortable. But if you think about a goal and you have that in mind, we're going to run through something real quickly here. So I'm going to give it just a second to give you time for that. And you probably, as a business owner, you probably have these top of mind. They're probably up behind your monitor or something. I know mine are up there. But let's say your goal was to increase monthly customer rating, your NPS or your evaluations by 10% for quarter two. Okay. So sorry, I got ahead of myself there. That is a goal that has some specifics on it. It has a timeline and communicates what you want to do, but we can develop that further. So the SMART goals, like I said, you've probably heard of this. This is a cheat sheet, though, that if you want to use to train others on how to write SMART goals, this can be really helpful. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound or timely. These are things that you can do to make sure that the goal is clearly communicated, to make sure that the employees understand. And as a business owner, you might be talking to all of your employees. You might be the one who sits down and does reviews with all of your employees. And when you grow, you'll be talking to managers about talking to their employees. So, in the time that you spend on these performance evaluations, some of it is train the trainer. So, if you want this information, and I know Anya's going to send this out as well, but if you want this information on how to explain to somebody what a SMART goal is, there's some fantastic bullet points in here. And things that I would call out is the attainable piece. It's something that figuring out what those goals are, it's not easy. The goal itself shouldn't be too easy. It should present a challenge, but it shouldn't feel like it's so far out there that the employee can't achieve it or doesn't understand the path to get there. So when you look at your goals, this is a piece of it to help make it understandable for the employees. And I talked about you writing the goals for your employees or your managers writing the goals for your employees. The flip side of it is, and you can do this in performance reviews, is you can ask the employees what their goals are and guide them to create a SMART goal for themselves. So the company might have 2 or 3 specific goals that you are asking people to achieve. But you might give time in a performance conversation to allow the employee to say, well, what's your goal? And, hopefully all of your employees say it's to be a director, to be a VP, to be CEO. But maybe it's something outside of there. Maybe it's achieving an educational goal, or maybe it's achieving certification or hobby or something like that. So you've got something where you could spend time guiding the employee through creating this for themselves, which would help them understand how you create goals for them and help them understand the process. So feel free to screen cap that, or like I said, we'll send this out with a presentation, but this is a great way to look at how these goals, attainable, relevant, time-bound goals, can be created. Okay. So here's a quick, shorter reminder. Sometimes I've seen people hang these up in offices or them out for employees as part of a review, which can be helpful. So, and here's another one. This has been around for a while because it's helpful, because it's useful, because it's a way of making sure that the communication is there in a way that the employee can understand. It's not just this, big, audacious, hairy goal. We've all heard of BHAG goals. Those are great. To get there, you have to break it down. You have to find the way to make it really attainable and a map for employees. Okay, so back to our increase monthly customer rating by 10%. If you were to take all the things from the SMART goal and add that into it, it would develop into something like review calls and support customer service team supervisor. Set up a cadence to review with the supervisor and or the team members for the following 60 days. Relay feedback and coach in order to improve. That helps get you further and get you more into the goal in a way that the employee can achieve it. So goals are important. And when you're preparing for the performance review, you might have put a few together for your employees. You might have asked them to create some. Your managers might have some. That is important. But then having that conversation is not easy. Those frank conversations sometimes they're emotional. They can be emotional. They can be somebody frankly, feeling the feelings of past performance reviews that were not done well, that they're fearful are going to come back up again. And in a performance evaluation meeting, whether you're doing them annually, hopefully more frequently than that, maybe you're doing them twice a year, maybe you're doing them quarterly, maybe it's part of your one-on-one cadence with your employees, which would be amazing. When I teach this in undergraduate and even graduate courses, the overwhelming number of students think, coming from the experience that they have, that more frequent performance reviews are what is helpful to them or what are helpful to the companies. And so creating a structure, and it can be a spreadsheet. It can be, something spun up kind of big in a performance management software system, but having something that is predictable, having something that is comforting for the employee to know what to expect will go a long way to removing that fear and being able to have that communication happen in a more effective way. Ideally, in a performance evaluation, if you're the manager who's delivering it, you're listening more than half the time. You are really giving the employee that opportunity to talk through their experiences and what they have seen. Part of this is making sure that you've got your high performers, that you're keeping them engaged. There's sometimes a feeling like, well, I'm going to spend my time on the people who are underperforming because that's where we need to make the work and make the moves. Don't forget your high performers. Those are the ones that need that reassurance and time too, because you can probably get more out of them. You can make sure that their energies are directed the right way and they can feel that engagement with the company. It should go without saying, but it's a tough thing to do, to be honest and to give constructive feedback. We all have a range of how comfortable we feel and how we give difficult feedback. So somebody might, be very blunt and give a very direct, this is what you're doing wrong. And then you may have somebody on the other end of the spectrum who puts so much fluff around it that the message gets lost. Obviously, you want to be somewhere in the middle there. So hopefully a message like that, if you have to give some difficult feedback, hopefully it's not a surprise. Hopefully you've talked about it before. And in the performance meeting, you can say, I want to bring up this aspect of the work that you're doing where you're falling short of the goal. And we've talked about it 2 weeks ago. We talked about it a month ago. Hopefully you can refer back to times when it's been brought up. So the employee doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I've never heard this before. And they're already in an immediately defensive mode. And in this one-on-one meeting, if the employee mentions a problem, you can ask them for their solution. You can ask them to come back to you with a solution. Sometimes the employees gunny sack things, not just managers, but they wait up and they save everything up for that, meeting when they're finally going to get to say their piece. And you can hear them out, you can spend time with them, but you can guide the conversation in a way that says, okay, that's a really interesting concern. That's a really interesting problem. Tell me, have you thought about a solution for it? Have you thought about something that might help you with that? And you can give them the time and the platform to be heard for that. Depending on the level of employee that you're coaching, they might have a skill set where they're comfortable with that or they might not. But again, you're guiding them towards being a participant in the company, being a participant that moves the company's goals forward, not just, fills a seat or does a adequate or a subadequate job. So as you're going through the performance evaluation, here's some do's and don'ts. And you've probably heard these before, but again, it's good to hear them and it's good to have them in one place if you're training somebody else on how to give a performance evaluation. There are times when a company will bring somebody in because they are a fantastic performer. They're excited about managing people, but they just haven't been trained and they haven't been given the skills to do that sort of training. So here's a few things. I'm not going to read them to you, but it's just good reminders for how to have that conversation. And as you get ready for performance evaluation, it's a good idea to look at something like this just to make sure that you are doing it in a way that's going to help the employee. So one way of providing feedback is via a method called COIN. And then that's been around for a few years. And then some very smart people looked at it and said, we could make this better. We could improve it. And they called it COILed. The idea, at least in the first 3 steps, is that you connect with the employee. You give them a moment of warmth. You give them a moment of connect. Maybe you're talking about a possible like a sports game. Maybe you're just talking about something as innocuous as the weather. But you connect and you say, okay, here's why we're sitting down today. We want to talk about your performance over the last 6 months or the last 3 months or the last week, whatever it is. You give them an observation that talks about the behavior that you either want to improve or you want to continue. And it could be, hey, I've seen you talking with our customers and the feedback has been amazing. XYZ client has, said this about you or kind of give them that feedback and what you've observed. And then let them know what the impact is of those behaviors. Again, positive or negative. Maybe it is that, this client is so happy they've referred other clients to us and they're requesting you. This is amazing. That impact is huge for the company. On the negative side, it could be, I've observed that you're coming in 10 to 15 minutes late multiple times a week. And, to be honest, the impact there is that it's demoralizing for your other colleagues. It's something that your coworkers have to pick up the slack. It takes time to get the team meetings going, whatever the impact is for your company. But you give them that idea of this is how their actions ripple out to their colleagues, to the customers, to the business as a whole. Now, COIN, the short version of it, is that you then just work forward with the employee on next steps and talk to them about what they would visualize and what they would see as the next steps. COIL takes it a little bit further and says, you're going to ask the employee what they think. You're going to listen to their opinion on it and have that kind of adult conversation. Together, you establish a solution and then you have a definite agreement. So again, this is a short training. This is a very short introduction to it, but this is a great way to plan your meeting with the employees or help your managers plan the meeting with the employees so that they've got a roadmap for it. Okay, and this is a good example of what it would look like. Again, I'm not going to read it to you. We've got a very short period of time here, but this is a great example of, on the left-hand side, COIN, and then if you were to make it a little bit longer, the COIN side might work for your entry-level, line-level employees, certain situations that are pretty cut and dry. Foiled might be something that you need to do for bigger problems or people who have more responsibility, things like that. Okay, so a couple of takeaways. The performance reviews are not just tasks that have to be checked off. They are something that will increase profitability. They protect your investments, your employees, and prepare your workforce for future growth.